In the second century, the work of Seneca, the tragic Roman playwright, became popular. His plays were said to be violent and bloody. Unlike the Greeks, the Romans had no problem showing acts of violence on stage. Their very nature was all about competition. So the whole notion of men fighting each other, or blood sports as they were called, seemed to appeal to the culture. It was a part of popular culture. The Roman Empire um, fell in 476 AD. Between the period of the birth of Christ and the fall of the Roman Empire, the Romans still celebrated with festivals, and the competitions were amped up in terms of the violence of them, the aggressive nature of these competitions. Um, in terms of theater, however, the structure was no longer there, and bands of itinerant performers roamed, performing for whoever would hire them, also for whoever might gather on the street to perform. At that time, and we are going to see this happening as we move forward through the Middle Ages, theater became a tool for propaganda, a way of um, um, possibly discussing the nature of the transition, the as we were moving closer to Christianity. Theater sometimes um, did a lot to create some animosity, some anger, and eventually, for about 1,000 years, theater was not performed in any sort of organized, structured way, because theater up to this point was all about um, pagan society and the worship of many gods. So it was totally contradictory and presented a negative side of this whole issue as far as people were concerned. We are now in the Middle Ages, and the Middle Ages, in terms of theater, can be divided into three phases. Early, from 900 to 1050, high, from 1050 to 1300, and late, from 1300 to 1500. During the first two phases of the Middle Ages, theater was performed in churches and monasteries. It was called liturgical drama because it was a part of the Catholic service. It was incorporated into the service. The purpose, of course, was fundamentally to celebrate Christ. However, the other purpose of theater in general was to educate the uneducated about Christianity. The Middle Ages were referred to as the Dark Ages because the majority of the people there could not read. They were illiterate. Theater became a tool to educate these people about Christianity. Liturgical dramas were performed by priests and choir boys, clergy. Uh, it was in Latin, sung or chanted, as I said, during incorporated into a church service. And the first or the earliest liturgical drama was one called Ken Whom Do You Seek? And it tells the story of the women arriving at the tomb of Christ to see that The stone was rolled away. Christ is no longer there. They encounter the angel at the tomb of Christ who asks, "Whom do you seek?" Charites. Because it had to do with the resurrection of Christ, it was performed um, most often during Easter or at Easter time. Eventually, it was realized by the church and lay people that uh, the impact of liturgical drama wasn't really what they hoped it would be. For one thing, it was in the church and it was in Latin, and it seemed that only the clergy understood and appreciated Latin. By the late phase of the Middle Ages, from 1300 to 1500, theater moved outside of the church and became something that was performed by lay people. And instead of being in Latin, it was in the language that the people spoke, vernacular, the common language of the people. This was called vernacular religious drama. It became accessible because this was performed outdoors. Early in the 14th century, a festival that brought together clergy and lay people with the purpose of celebrating the resurrection of Christ, a feast day was started, was introduced. It is the Feast of Corpus Christi. And what is at the heart of this festival is a procession through the center of town. The feast celebrates the redemptive power of the holy sacraments. So the clergy, followed by the lay people together, are celebrating this mystery, the mystery of the holy sacraments, the body and blood of Christ. By the middle of the 14th century, the Feast of Corpus Christi became a feast day and was recognized throughout. Um, in performing theater during this time, that whole idea of the procession through town informed how theater was to be presented to people. Theater was not something that was performed indoors or as when it moved out of the church, it literally moved outside. So the procession was something that influenced the performance of theater. This was a period when, because so much of the Middle Ages, the early part of the Middle Ages, was so difficult because of the plague. During the 6th century, such a large uh, portion of the population in Europe was destroyed or killed because of this plague. As well, war ravaged so much of Europe. Um, but by the 14th century, calm started to return. With this calm brought a renewed ability to for trade and business. And at this time, businesses were formed in areas around Western Europe, primarily in parts of England. These businesses were structured around what is known as a guild. And the guild has a hierarchy. At the top is the master or owner of the business. Under the master, you had the people who produced the goods, shoes, um, ale, whatever the business was, blacksmithing. Um, they were referred to as journeymen, and under the journeymen were apprentices, young boys, young men who wanted to learn the trade. That was the guild structure: master, journeyman, apprentice. It's important to remember this because as we move into the 16th century, 17th century rather, we are going to see that that structure was very important. The interesting thing about the guilds was that members of these guilds, these men, took on the challenge of performing and presenting vernacular religious drama. In various parts of England, something called cycle plays were created. These are the stories of the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. And these stories were taken from the Bible and adapted into performable texts, plays, vernacular religious dramas. And they were arranged in cycles because you couldn't take the entire Old Testament and perform it, but you could take certain stories. And these cycles were performed in various areas of England, um, lots of them. Um, the interesting thing is that the performances of these cycle plays were organized, produced by members of these guilds. And it was all about the sense of doing something positive, educating the uneducated once again about Christianity. And it was effective because it was in the language that the people spoke.